So in our practice on this retreat, we're focusing on the Brahma Viharas, which is normally translated as the divine abodes. You know, abode is a place we can rest, we can even live. So a divine abode, that really sounds quite special. And these are heart qualities. They're heart qualities of the Absolute. Anything of the Absolute is unconditioned, which means it has no birth, no decay or death. It always lives, always has, always will. And that's what gives us a lot of confidence when we make contact, because we know it's not going to go anywhere. You know, our conditioned bodies will at some point age and will die and return to Mother Earth. But something in us doesn't. Whatever is the Absolute in us lives on, returns to the Absolute, and at some point can be reborn in some new version. But we do these practices. We start with the Upekkha, and I start with Upekkha because it's so subtle. If we start with Metta, which is like 4th of July fireworks for the Americans, when it's so flashy and splashy, when we get to Upekkha, it's like, I'm not sure what's here. So we start there. And also because being able to accept the truth of this moment is very powerful. Because as I've said, most of our pain, most of our suffering comes from resisting this moment. I don't like what's happening. I want it to be different. And that's the suffering. Even if something really unpleasant is happening, if we can accept it more fully, we have more resources available. We have more of the Absolute available. You can see even working with the neutral people with Upekkha, the big learning there is how much we project onto people we don't know. We give them whole stories. We give them backstories. You know, we just have decided their life based upon one gesture, one expression, one interaction. And that helps us pull back from that. When the judgments begin to arise, we realize, I'm just projecting this. I don't actually know. Until they tell me, I don't know. And with the mudita, it really lets us get in touch with resonant joy. Not our joy, another's joy. But it's infectious because it's the Absolute. So when they're in that joy of the Absolute, it resonates in us too. That's why we have this practice. And it breaks down the barrier of me and you, the separation. Your joy is my joy. That's how it feels. So it brings us closer together. And this is all part of the benefit of the Brahma Viharas. It helps us transformationally. We become more mature personalities. We become less reactive. Less of our childhood issues, less of our birth family issues are being projected onto the world. So we grow a little bit. We get less reactive. That's a good thing. And we have the possibility of opening to the transcendent, opening to the Absolute, really having deep experiences of the Brahma Viharas as a function of the Absolute. Again, no birth, no death. It's always present. And that gives us confidence where we can rest. We can be open to that, those heart qualities. As we learn each of the Brahma Viharas, they can become activated in us in a way that they begin to spontaneously arise. I think I told the story in Buddha's Heart of, I had a close student who I'd authorized as a teacher, and he was a bike rider. He'd do those competitions, you know, on bikes, ride miles and miles, and it cost him money, and he'd get a little something, and I said, how much money did you get? Oh, I got $13.12. You know, I don't know why they make so little, but that's how it works. But I got a call from his ex-wife that he was in the hospital. He had collapsed before a bike race. And it turned out he had a heart condition that no one knew. And so it put him into a coma, and his heart stopped for long enough that he was brain dead. So I traveled actually here to Washington to see him and be with him. And when I first got the news, like all of good, Western Buddhists, I said, okay, I need to do metta for him. So I sit down and I start practicing metta for him, and I find that my practice switches to upekkha. Like, no, I want to do metta. I'm doing metta, so focus on metta. So I'm doing metta shifts, and upekkha's here. What's the deal? So of course, I go back to metta again. Finally, the fourth time that upekkha shows up, okay, I'll do upekkha. I get it. And I do upekkha because I didn't know he was dying. I thought he was just in the hospital and had some incident like people have. And so I was more prepared when I got to the hospital, accepting the truth of this moment. When I was with him when he died, a couple of other people were too. And that's what really helped, was having the upekkha, being able to be right here. I didn't have the answers. I couldn't save him in any way, but I could be present. More present than I could have been without upekkha. So that's one of the benefits that we can have from these practices. Each of the Brahma Viharas can be practiced to the level of absorption, a level that has no self and has a deep experience, a penetration into the Brahma Vihara, where it's just that. You're just experiencing the brightness of the Brahma Vihara, whichever one. I had it happen here one time. I did these practices I mentioned a long time ago, but one retreat here, I just was delighted seeing people take to the practice so well, and I just was feeling all this mudita, seeing their joy at seeing how this works, and it's unfolding for me and all this. And I went down to the lunchroom and sat down before lunch, and all of a sudden jhana was there. And so I was in that for a while, and then it ended, and I said, what was that? Because it was spontaneous. But I knew based on the flavor that it was mudita. And it made sense, because I was feeling joy at their joy. It was resonant. So this can happen. This is the transcendent possibilities. And any of the Brahma Viharas can also open to awakening. I'm going to talk tonight about awakening, even though it's not the topic of our retreat, because it always fits in. It's always a possibility in anything that we do. We can wake up. So awakening is a experience that is available to all of us all the time. As I teach it and as I confirm awakenings, there's three components, and this is all from my book, Demystifying Awakening. The first is a deep experience of absence of self, traditionally called no self in Buddhism. And that starts with, normally if you ask somebody, who are you? They'll check in and this is my name, this is where I live, this is my age, all the details of life. And when absence of self is present, and if I ask somebody, who are you? The answer I usually get is, I don't know. And at first it's disturbing. We're used to finding something, someone, and there's no one there to find. There's just these pieces. And so we learn to gain more and more trust in the absence of self when it happens. We begin to realize, I can still function. My partner still knows me. I know that partner. I know what work I do. I remember my kids' names. I'm okay, even though I don't know who I am. And so we stay with it as long as we can. Most people fairly quickly start to reassert who they are. And we do that chiefly by our likes and dislikes. Most people walk through life judging everything they see. I like that tree, don't like that car, like this, like that, don't like that. And we repeat it all the time because we're reifying who we are. I know who I am based on my likes and dislikes. And so that's what we do when we first encounter absence of self, is we go through our list of all the likes and dislikes. And oh yeah, okay, here I am. Okay, I'm me, yeah. But at some point it happens and it stays. We have more ease, more comfort, more trust. And we stay not knowing who we are. Sometimes for long periods. I've had months go by where I had no idea who I was. It was like being an amnesia patient. I'd wake up in the morning, nope, no idea who I am. You know, I recognize the room, recognize my partner, all the different things, but not sure who I am. And so we get accustomed to that. Another of the components is a deep unity, a deep love experience. This is where the Brahma Viharas come in. So we have a deep love experience. We realize that everything is an undivided part of the wholeness. When I do the guided meditations into the love of the Absolute, that's what we're touching into. A love that can't be divided. It's always whole. It's always one. And so we experience it not just in a perception, we experience ourselves as part of that oneness. I'm the love too. I've been searching for love my whole life, and I'm love. Who knew? And so when you get that combination of the absence of self and the unity, the deep wholeness of love, and then the third component is the recognition, this is who I truly am. This is my true nature. I get it. All of that has an explosive effect when those three components come together. And the self is blown out for a period of time. The personality is dormant. What do the people experience? Vastness. The vastness we just were journeying in. Vastness, vastness. The emptiness, the nothingness, the love. And for awakenings in my teaching in the Zen tradition, the first awakening is called Kensho. It means seeing one's true nature. And so they'll have a Kensho experience. And the Zen teachers will talk about shallow or deep Kensho, which just means how long did it last? For some people it can last a minute, a split second, which is still an experience that's helpful. Zen Master Dogen called it dropping mind and body. So dropping identity in every form. And at some point the personality begins to assert itself again. Hello, remember me? And it starts showing up. Doesn't quite show up in the same way as it did before, but it still shows up. And so these people move between them. Sometimes they're the vastness, they're the functioning of the Absolute. And sometimes they're Joe, who works down the street at the store. You know, they're the personality. But the personality is never quite believed the same way. It's rocked. In traditional Theravada, the first stage of awakening, one of the chief qualities is called one of the chief things that goes away is personality view. So not personality, but personality view. That means I don't quite believe the personality. I may look through the eyes of the personality, but I know it's not solid because it was gone for a while. So that's the absence of personality view. And the person keeps practicing, and at some point, another awakening can happen. Same components. And one of the hard lessons I learned after a first awakening was, it's not going to repeat itself the same way. I have people come to me, I've had this experience, you know, it's kind of like sports figures, you know, you'll hear about them having a good streak and they won't change their socks for weeks or months. They want to preserve everything the way it was. And that's what I did. I tried to have the same meditation and almost, wear the same clothes in the same spot and do all these things. How come you're not happening? And I spent years trying to recreate this experience. And finally it dawned on me, I had this great epiphany that lightning's not going to strike the same place twice. So then once I gave up trying to recreate it, then possibilities opened. And another realization could happen. And in my teaching, there's a rule I have called the 51% rule. One's consciousness, 51% or more of consciousness awakens, there becomes a stability. I call that a satori realization. And what happens for the individual is the personality, which is the foundation, gets displaced, and our true nature becomes the foundation. So those students, when I say, "Who are you?" I'm the Absolute. I'm the qualities of the Absolute. But the qualities of the Absolute in our consciousness, I call true nature. So the qualities that are here, that's where they're landed. And that's quite a great place to be, because we begin to see our behavior. We don't have the same attachment, the same stickiness. We don't need things from people the same way. For most people, their primary relationships improve. Your spouse likes you better, which is a little disconcerting, but I can see why. Even if they don't know what happened. And then there's a third realization in the Zen tradition, which is extremely rare. It's called Daigo Teitei. Daigo means great, and I guess Teitei means enlightenment or realization. So it's considered the final realization. In truth, it's not the final realization, but it's the final big one. It's a hallmark. Same components, same absence of self, same love, same recognition. But when this one happens, it's not fast, it's slow. It can take weeks, months, years to happen, because every step has to be worked, and there has to be resolution of all these different issues of the personality and the structuring. And it has to be done affirmatively at each step. Yes, I want to do this, I want to go on, I'm willing to put that down. And so we work through whatever way that is, rewriting our history, rewriting our self-identity along the way. And at some point there's the final resolution, which is the resolution of the core wound I talked about the other night. The core wound when we turn away from presence in the Absolute as babies. I choose the caregivers, I need them. But we take it as, I got thrown out, I'm flawed, I'm broken. And that's our big secret we carry. And in this realization, that gets resolved. We see into it, we see the falseness of it. It's like standing with the ocean to your back, screaming, "Where's the water?" And we turn around. Ah, you've always been here. And so that's the Daigo Teitei realization. I only know about 5 people that have had that realization, so it's a fairly small number, but significant. And the good news is it's happening more. All of these are happening more. In my new book, I just turned into my editor, it's called Soothing the Longing Heart. I've included about 7, I think, awakening stories for my students. So people like you who have had awakenings in the last couple of years. So they're new. They're not old stories of these masters in ancient China. These are everyday people. And I think it's very inspiring to have those stories, to read, to see that all this is possible. And just to bring it back, this is why we practice the Brahma Viharas, both, again, to mature our personality, to let go of old habits, patterns, and open ourselves to the Absolute, to return home.